Great. We're going to go ahead and get started. Alina, you want to lead us off?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So welcome everybody to Culture, Communication, and Career Pathing. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure to be with you all at this fantastic Zero Waste Conference for the next 2 days. I will be the moderator for this first session B, where we have 3 really incredible speakers and zero waste leaders who will share the programs that they've created to inspire cultural change and employ some strategic communication tactics on how to get to zero waste, as well as career pathing. And next slide. Just a quick introduction. My name is Alina Beckerman, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm a zero waste consultant and a board member for the Northern California Recycling Association. I also love talking trash. And it's a fantastic opportunity to be here with you all as someone who's worked in both commercial and corporate sustainability, managing programs. It's really fantastic to introduce the leaders of these sessions that you'll be hearing shortly. So our first speaker, next slide, will be Bruce Buchan, the founder and CEO of Clean River Recycling Solutions, which is an innovative and flexible approach to commercial waste collection. Bruce has over 30 years of experience in effective waste management tactics, where culture, communication, and collection stand as the 3 key factors to achieving zero waste. Next slide. Our next speaker will be Stacy Savage, CEO of Zero Waste Strategies, an environmental consulting firm supporting the new circular economy. Stacy is known as the Texas trash talker, love that, and recycling nerd. And Stacy offers a vast experience, true zero waste consulting, and employs a number of tactics where including online courses and on-site consultations, involve a 3-tier approach to what programs are available through her organization. And then our final speaker will be Jay Bassett. Jay has 35 years of experience in the public sector, including 14 years of work with the EPA. And today, Jay serves on a number of different boards, supporting both local, state, and national organizations, and advancing sustainability and circular economy solutions. And without further ado, I would like to take you to our first speaker. So Bruce, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Alina, for the introduction. And again, thank you to the National Zero Waste Conference for affording me the opportunity to share 30 years of learnings. And my goal here today, as we talk about culture, communication, and collection, is to provide at least one key takeaway for everyone in the webinar you can take back to your facility to make a positive difference. Next. So whenever we get started with people, we always like to understand, where's your organization at? Are you just beginning the journey? Have you been at it for a while? Or are you at the zero waste? And really, what are you looking to get out of this? Looking to start or just tweak your program? Next. Whenever we get involved with people, we always ask the first question is, what is important to you? And, is it compliance issues? Is it time saving? Is it culture? Is money the real driver? What is driving the initiative and why are you here today? Next. What I can tell you is 99% of the time it is about the money. And although a lot of people believe it's a nice to do project, there are real opportunities here financially to, generate cost avoidance dollars or even revenue generation, how the program's going. Next. So I want to take you back a little ways. When I started, recycling was the 3 R's, if we all recall, the reduce, reuse, recycle. And that's all we knew back then, doing the best we could. But as zero waste initiatives came on stream, I believed it took a different approach to get to the lofty goals of zero waste. And that's where the 3 C's of culture, communication, and collection were created. Next. And just to take you back, a traditional recycling program, when we got involved years ago, people, they'd start collecting. And they'd be collecting the low-hanging fruit, the paper, the beverage containers, and gradually get up and, minimal communication. But what we always found is that people never really got past that 50% mark. So it required a different approach. Next slide. For example, what we've determined over the years is when people start the collection phase, they get a container, collect the low-hanging fruit, and you can hit 25, 30, maybe a little bit more. And then programs many times just fall off. It becomes yesterday's news. They don't know what to say. And then there's a boost. And whatever's driving that initiative, maybe it's cost or compliance, but communication is now critical to raise awareness. And that it's not just about a label. But what we also found was it plateaued. And then because the floor is always moving, people are coming and going. But to really get to those lofty heights of zero waste and be the environmental steward, it really takes a different approach, and it's all about the culture. Next slide. What I honestly believe and what I've seen is everybody's doing it backwards. Because if you focus on culture as phase 1 and get everybody on board and you understand, your communication is going to be a lot easier. And it's my firm belief that if you have a solid culture in place, you can give people a shoebox and they'll know how to do the right thing. So what is involved in culture? Next slide. Many things, and these are just a few points, but ultimately it's leadership taking a stake in the ground. Are you an organization, innovation driven and willing to make changes? Transparency, engagement, and addressing things like the extended producer policy. All of us have materials coming and going out to the building, and maybe it's time to address, how you do purchasing. And again, is your culture a flavor of the month? It's Earth Day, let's plant a tree, and it's just to be forgotten. One of the areas we've had to focus with is the cave people, and this represents citizens against virtually everything. And we know who these people are, but no matter what's, what undertaking you're going on, it's never good. So, it speaks of change, and people sometimes don't like change. So we ask people, get a read on your culture before you begin this. Next slide. Does culture, it has an impact, and it touches on the brand and impacts you socially and financially. Next slide. For an example, years ago when we were hiring employees, we had all the power. We got their resume, we knew who they were and where they were from, but they knew very little about us. Fast forward to today with the millennials and Gen Zs, they know, when they're looking, they can do more research on our company than you can imagine. And the point is, if you're an organization with a bad environmental history, perhaps you're losing out on top talent because of the culture you have there as you address sustainability. Next slide. Several years ago, I was in a quick serve restaurant with my daughter and a friend, and we had our sandwich, and then they went to do the right thing. And when they put the recycling and trash in, they opened it up, and what they found was everything was going into the trash. And, coming back and said, this isn't right. So what did they do? Next slide. Social media has a tremendous impact. And what I can tell you is people will love you for trying, but they'll absolutely hate you for lying and make you pay. So you imagine the people, having a sandwich and getting upset and not going back there. There's a financial impact. Next slide. And it can get worse. And there's no shortage of articles out there in the news about what is going on and what people think. Next slide. The highlight, you can see your 12,000 shares, and it's where I don't see myself ever going back. Over the years, I've had personal face-to-face conversations with the CEOs of Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, and Tim Hortons up in Canada. And I asked them, do you ever get negative messages or comments on social media? And they all said, yes, we do. Of course we do. So marketing takes care of it. And then I asked them all, has it ever gone viral? A situation so bad? And they go, oh yeah. And that's where you have to bring in the public relations firm, maybe $5,000 a day to address the issue. But what I'm really trying to get at is the organization's culture. Is it that of greenwashing and make more money, or is it one of integrity and doing the right thing? Next slide. When it comes to communication, it's not about a label. It's about green team getting involved, senior management goals, and I'm not talking about an annual report that says we diverted 100,000 metric tons of waste. It doesn't mean anything to people. And it's reporting out on the metrics and, addressing your collection stream accuracy. And again, something as simple as what message does your equipment convey? If your recycling containers look like they should be recycled, then the employees may say, if they don't take it serious, why should I? And again, it's keeping fresh, relevant updates, sharing, learning, and onboarding right at the beginning. And why do we say this? Next slide. Because recycling can be confusing, as we've all seen. The image on the left shows drink containers in each slot. Perhaps they didn't know if that milk container was paper, a beverage container, maybe it's trash. It's very confusing. But the one on the right, I took a picture of when I was in Vegas one time. And when you talk about greenwashing, if you can see that message, all trash is recycled. And we know that's simply not true. But then again, Vegas is quite a magical place. So it's little things like this you see that send the wrong message. Next slide. We've done a lot of testing with areas on what works best. Is it just straight text or pictograms or clusters of pictures? But what I can tell you, people only have 2 to 3 seconds to decide. This is not a life-changing decision when you're recycling. So what we ultimately tell people is less is more. So keep it simple. Next slide. When it got to confusion, we were also building and creating these dioramas, because if you're in an environment where you have, let's say, a cafeteria, you actually have the ability to put all the products and items on display so people can readily see what's going on. Next slide. So to keep it simple, 4 tips. If you're about to do this with communication and graphics, keep it simple, keep it consistent, keep it visible, and change when change is needed, because if your streams change and you don't change the graphics, it just undermines the whole program. Next slide. Collection is a really big area, and it's the flow, because we all have materials coming in from the front of the house to the back of the house. And we urge people to start with their waste hauler just to see if there's changes or savings or frequencies and pickups. And again, if you're buying containers, it's different on a manufacturing floor versus an office suite. And you want to avoid that financial restraints. We have a 45-gallon drum, put a label on it, we're good to go. And we call that lipstick on a pig. But as you go down through all of these other considerations, 2 I want to focus on, and one is custodial. They're your last line of defense. Because if you purchase containers, you're going to change their life. Maybe it's going to take longer, maybe it's not as safe. And again, think about, we've been in situations with unions where they want to, now they're going to collect recycling, and they say simply, no, that's not in our collective bargaining agreement, it's just waste. And again, the last one is think about the future ready aspect of what you're doing. Next slide. We've all seen confusion before, and I'll just take a look at the coffee cup. Is it paper? Is it waxed paper? Is it compostable? We simply don't know. And we've been hearing this so often that people are confused that we came up with another idea. Next slide. And that's the innovative, I don't know bin. People have 2 to 3 seconds. Next slide. Here's how it works. You have your program going and you just speak to custodial and say, we'll manage this, so people can throw items in there if they don't know what it is. And consider this, a coffee cup could have 5 parts, a cup, a lid, a sleeve, a straw, and residual liquids. But what you need to do is collect the items, and then once you collect them, you identify the problems, and then you educate. Next slide. Change is a constant. When I got started, we had to separate 9 different streams, and about 10 years ago, it leveled off at 3, which was just trash, mixed beverage containers, and mixed paper. And then it changed to single stream or commingle. And then it changed to we have to collect organics. And then it changed to electronics. So what I'm saying is think about the move that's going forward. Next slide. One of the things that we've seen out in the field is if you just have a waste bin sitting there collecting everything and people want to start a recycling program, obviously they say, let's buy a new bin. Costs money. And what we say is chances are the volume that's in those bins is right size. So maybe you just need to separate it. And what that does is save you some money, but it also prevents second or third containers from disappearing. And that's a good thing. So as we're getting started in the zero waste, next slide, please. There is a lot of things to address, and here are some of the key questions. And as you're reading through these things, but what I strongly urge people to consider is focus on what is important to you and what is missing in your existing program. And it just could be the culture, or what are you struggling with, or the confusion. Because when you're transparent and get this going, next slide. When you succeed, stakeholders will see the difference. And from customers, you made it easy for me to do the right thing, and even from your staff. I'm proud to contribute to our sustainability goals. And the key stakeholders, we're managing our recycling costs. So as I approach sort of the end of my little overview on zero waste, I'd like to take you to another slide. Next. And it's a roadmap or a path, because if you're starting, we urge people to start with the hauler contracts, because that's where you can uncover some financial savings. Because no matter what you're doing with a program, if you are limited with your financial, or there's financial restrictions, it's going to lead to poor planning, resulting in poor design, ultimately the wrong equipment, which ends up in confusion and high contamination, and then it ends up with the custodial not knowing what to do. And then there's the rogues, orphans, and graveyards. And I like to inject a little humor into this on some of the travels and pictures I've seen, and to show you examples of what these are. So next slide. A rogue, well, basically, it's a container off plan or left behind. And this is an example of a program we set up where somebody forgot to take away the old waste containers. And when it comes to the 3 C's of culture, culture in this area is, it's not my job. So that's not a good thing. Next slide. When it comes to recycling orphans, these are just standalone containers that are there for no apparent reason. And when it comes to the 3 C's of collection, the attitude is more is better. Next slide. And finally, the graveyard. This is where they all go to die. And it's a sad thing. But really, the communication that's being played out here is zero. So you can see what I'm talking about. It's very important to look at all the aspects. And as I come to the end of my portion of the presentation, I want to leave you with a thought. Next slide. Never mind what people believe, but how can we change what they do? And it is my belief that culture is the driver. So I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope I made sense, and more importantly, I hope I provided at least one key takeaway to impact your sustainable program in a positive way. Thank you for your time.
Fantastic. And now we'll move on to Stacy Savage. Stacy.
All right. Hey, y'all. I'm Stacy Savage. I'm founder and CEO of Zero Waste Strategies. We're in a consulting firm here in the Austin area. We're going to talk about education, engagement, and empowerment, how we can get employee buy-in for program success. Next slide, please. Zero Waste Strategies has worked with many large companies, small companies, municipalities, as well as haulers, processors, nonprofit institutions, college campuses, and such. Next slide. The first thing I want to talk about is this new report that was released just recently by Honeywell. They did a research project with Fortuum research, and they said that out of the 653 organizations or businesses that they interviewed, 65% of them ranked sustainability for their upcoming year as the top priority, their initiatives. It outranks all of the other ones that you see below. Next slide. So I really want to talk about how to engage your employees. These employees will be your go-to champions if you engage them. But a lot of times businesses they'll start with the top, right? They'll start with the executives who are responsible for researching good policy, putting that policy into place, making sure it has funding and enforcement, setting the expectation and the green culture. And in return, the managers take that information and they convey it to the employees. But I would really encourage businesses to really take a bottom-up approach instead. This will help you to really learn from the newer generations, right? We're talking about your millennials, younger millennials and Gen Z that are coming into the workforce, and they are starting to really get a taste of what, kind of corporate America is all about. And a lot of times they're getting disillusioned because they're the things that they really value, things like sustainability, can't necessarily be found, or it's not promoted internally as much as it should be. So really taking the energy, the innovation, organizing, the ownership, and peer-to-peer influence from the grassroots of the employees and helping them be empowered to push that upward to the executives, really doing a bottom-up program outreach. Of course, your executives are going to be the ones to make the final decision regarding where does the money need to be funneled into, what programs are going to be most cost effective, which programs are going to be most impactful. But I feel that exchange needs to be front and center and needs to be an open dialogue. Next slide, please. So this is for executives and probably, the C-suite managers. Is one example to do this is really to push a corporate pledge campaign that employees and customers, investors, shareholders can really sign on to. This is a great example called World Refill Day. I'm sure many of you are familiar, but it really sets out just 4 basic components of really encouraging people to choose to reuse and to ditch single-use plastics, to really find places to refill. So using their app to where you can find businesses that are participating, promoting all of that on social media, what you're doing, what a particular business is doing, how you were easily able to refill your container that you brought in because they made it accessible to you, and pushing other businesses who might be laggards or who may not see the benefit just yet, helping them to realize that. So really telling businesses to act. Next slide, please. Another way that we can really push the empowerment of employees and the younger generations and people who are coming into the workforce, even your older folks like me, Gen X, who are working, at companies, or really pushing this in a gamified manner. If you'll see here, Harvard University uses the garbage games. Every semester, they will have students come in and do basically a waste sort, and they'll have competitions in teams, and they'll go back through all the materials that were sorted and make sure that all the components are in the right pile. It's a really fun way to help students understand what's in the waste stream, or what's in the material stream, where a lot of this stuff comes from. So you can see the logos, you can see the type of material, and they can identify with that in their own individual lives. And they can say, oh, I've been putting this in the trash can, but it's actually recyclable. So they really can do the waste sort there on site, and then they can get a much higher level view of the material stream, but also get a very finite view, or not finite, excuse me, kind of a drilled down approach, if you will, about how their everyday actions at the waste bin will affect the material sorting later on. Next slide. The City of Austin has a wonderful game, and this is actually something that businesses can use. Let's say that here in Austin, they have the Universal Recycling Ordinance. All businesses, all commercial properties are required to recycle, rigid plastics, glass, your metal containers, as well as cardboard and paper. What the city of Austin has done is made a game out of this that you can find on their website. I think many cities have duplicated this approach as well. And it increases in toughness, I guess you could say, when, level by level. So it's great for kids just starting out, but it's also great to incorporate this at your place of business. You can actually have this as part of your onboarding process to have people come in and test their knowledge on what do I know about recycling? In the city of Austin's recycling program, do these materials go here or here? If your business is within the city of Austin that has to comply with the recycling ordinance, this game corresponds with exactly what is and is not allowed in Austin's recycling program for businesses. Next slide, please. For municipalities, this is great. Far out in West Texas, El Paso has a brand new pilot program to reward residents whenever they recycle their PET. And so Texan by Nature, which is a statewide nonprofit, does a lot of legislative work and works with county governments. They've partnered with Texans for Clean Water, Sam's Club, and several other nonprofits to really launch this program and helps El Pasoans deposit their recyclable plastics, but also they get a ticket after that, and they can use that at different, participating businesses that are working within this program to receive a reward or maybe a cash benefit or something along those lines. And obviously, we've seen many times across many states that a monetary incentive for recycling shows a huge increase in participation and about a 30% reduction of litter in our waterways and roadways. Unfortunately, here in Texas, we have worked 6 legislative sessions to get a bottle bill passed, and the beverage industry has lobbied very strongly against. We have Dr. Pepper, we have Budweiser, we have St. Honor Brewing, we have all kinds of beverage manufacturers here in Texas that are absolutely putting the kibosh on a deposit and credit system for recycling recycling of containers, beverage containers, unfortunately. Okay, next slide. So one way that businesses can help employees really recycle right is to create a mobile app where they can go into the app and they can really type in kind of what they need to recycle, where it can be recycled on site, as in within the confines of the building, so that they can find their nearest 3-bin system or 2-bin system if you don't have a food program. But it's a really great way that they can track their recycling progress. They can compete with their peers, earn points for incentives, boost collective recycling rates site-wide, and then the local economic impacts of those efforts can be converted into charts and graphs and pushed out to in newsletters or at safety meetings or whatnot, so that people can understand, yes, I am having an individual impact on the collective scheme of this building's recycling plan. There's me digging in trash. This was a client in North Carolina. We did a waste, not a waste audit. We're not saying waste anymore. We're doing a materials composition study. And we were able to, it was a bit smaller, so not as used to sorting such a small sample size, but we were making sure that we got the appropriate sample size for how many employees they had on site and how many days of operation. And then we just started sorting and weighing and cataloging what was in the material stream. And after we were done, we actually got the facility manager in the dumpster with us, pulling materials out. He was geared up, y'all. He had the tongs, he had the goggles, he had the gloves. We were up to our elbows for like 4 hours digging in trash. And he had so much fun, and he was able to relay that to his employees. Actually, his employees started coming out and watching him in the mix with us, pulling all these materials out, sorting and weighing, and really showing his commitment to his employees, how much this mattered to him and to the company. Once we got home back to Texas, we were able to sit down with all the data after we trained their staff, and we did, of course, a zero waste master plan for their site. And they can use this for green storytelling opportunities, such as benchmarking, using this in a competitive marketing edge against any competitors in the area, really use it to boost morale among employees and management staff, and use it, like Bruce said previously, for talent recruitment, especially the younger generations. They are really looking for businesses that they can get behind their policies, and the talent recruitment, not just recruitment, but retention, is really critical now that we are opening back up after these long COVID years. People are looking for something that they can really sink their teeth into. And these younger generations are all about the sustainability aspect of a company's operations. Next slide. Oh, there I am in trash again. Okay, they don't call me the Texas trash talker for nothing, y'all. Another way that we have worked with another business is we perform a materials composition study at an international banking institution in downtown Austin, and we've done this for the past 5 years. And this is really a deep dive that provided the insights of their annual flow of materials and their entire building's recycling rate. Next slide. As you can see, educating, engaging, and empowering their employees is where we got a more than double % jump from 2018 to 2019. We had some increases from 27 to 2018, but that 2019 jump is really where we came in and sat down with them and went through the why around why do we recycle and why do we have to do it properly. We talked about job creation. We talked about climate impacts. We talked about all sorts of things that help them connect the dots about what is my action at the bin and how does that impact once I let it go from my hand. If it ends up in the wrong bin, we got a problem. So it really helped them understand that individual actions affect the collective at a much higher level and further down the stream. So we had a 33% increase. And of course, we have to throw in that COVID. Nobody was at the building, so we didn't do a waste audit. Next. So avoid a frustration and embarrassment. Of course, people get up to the recycling bin, like Bruce said, that recycling confusion, whether it's the signage, it's the color coding is off, it can really create embarrassment, frustration, and then people start to get apathetic. That apathy is what really drives people to get a deflated morale around this kind of thing. So really having that clear signage and to help stop that cross-contamination, make sure that the education piece is really front and center. Color coding your bins, making sure that the corporate culture is set, the expectations are high, and that they're set at the get-go through the onboarding process, and then really using that eco messaging throughout your internal operations, whether that's company newsletters, company events, building out your green teams, or setting executive examples. Next. So of course, creating a green team is, finding your champions. The material reduction is really the lowest hanging fruit of any operational efficiency. So just like water and energy conservation, materials reduction can help save money. We want to boost employee morale using this empowering platform for teamwork. And we really want to have staff bragging to their friends and family outside of work, rather than breaking down the company's internal issues or their internal lack of sustainable programs. So once you've got those in place and people feel really comfortable using them, you can build up the reputation of the company as they're bragging to their friends and family outside of work. And of course, aligning with the social justice values and the $360 billion in spending power brought to the consumer market by Gen Z. They like to be called Zoomers, and that is from Bloomberg.com. And then focusing on your green team trends, of course, internal operations, helping people reduce their footprint at home so that they can mimic those same actions at work and while they're recreating as well. Bring your consumers into the equation as well. Like I said in that first couple of slides, that social media campaign that World Refill Day was using. Bring the consumers in and help them feel like a part of the big thing. And then link all this to your corporate goals with your green team. Here's one client that we had. They got their employees to sign on to getting rid of all of their single-use coffee mugs. And they were able to go with Belden's zero waste branded coffee mugs that they received these for free. No matter how long you've been with the company, every single employee got their own, and they use the washing stations and they make sure to bring them, back, because they know if they come back to the office the next day without their container, there's going to be nothing to drink coffee with, right? So there's a consequence for not bringing your reusable back to the office. And it's a great marketing opportunity. Oops, the wording is, nope, you're good. I'm just looking at the wording there. Was kind of hiding behind the picture there. But anyway, another thing that folks can do at work is when people are ordering takeout or delivery, of course, you can refuse common items that usually come in those orders, like condiment packets, your cutlery, your straws, single-use anything, salt and pepper packets. And a lot of times you've got the employee kitchen that there's already ketchup and mustard or whatever condiment, salt, pepper. Usually people will be fine with just using that. The same goes for at-home food orders. Food orders at home, you can usually put in a note that says that where you can put, no condiments, no cutlery, no single-use items, anything along those lines. Maybe they'll read it, maybe they won't, but at least you made the attempt, right? And then employees can also make their bring your own basics bag, as featured here on the right, where you can pack up all kinds of reusables. Next slide. I am a true certified advisor here with the Green Business Certification Inc. Next slide. And we are offering our Cash for Trash Green Business Program. We have a 3-tier system. Tier 1 is a kind of zero waste 101 boot camp, 6-week online. Tier 2 is much more advanced. We go deep dive into your specific business site and your industry for hard to recycle items and other policy compliance issues. And we really dial in your systems. And then Tier 3 is a full suite of services. Fly my team out, we'll come and do the white glove service for you, top to bottom. We'll interview, we'll train, we'll do the zero waste master plan, we'll get all the data together for you, the waste audit, all of that. So there's all kinds of options here for folks, and we will meet you where you're at, where you're ready to get started. So with that, I will pass it on over to Jay. And feel free to take a screenshot of my info here if you'd like, and connect with us on all the socials.
Lots of hand claps there, Stacy, and hearts and everything else. So impressive. Hey, Jay Bassett here, and I'm going to do a little bit different than maybe we heard from the two speakers, but maybe try to tie these things together. So I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling around how these principles, zero waste principles, are being applied as part of developing critical skills within the K-12 program, and how that's being played out here in Gwinnett County in Atlanta. I'm on the board of Gwinnett Clean and Beautiful, been on the board for a number of years. That's works with Gwinnett County Public Schools. And then how we use some of those tools and practices as part of a statewide effort working with faith-based communities. As I think Stacey, as you mentioned, meet people where they are, and then how do you get them to move from where you meet them where they are? So I'm going to do a little bit of story on that and try to wrap that together as a way to give you some thoughts about some on-the-ground activities and how that's playing out, at least here in Atlanta. So before we talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of, and let me just remind you all as we go, as we talk, the verbiage that you're going to see is really the verbiage that we typically hear of zero waste, waste audits, and other things for today. That's because we're on a journey here, but we're getting people to embed and look at the principles and practices. So bear with me as I kind of go through this, even if the language may be a little bit archaic. So the Green Healthy Schools program in Gwinnett, and if you're not aware, Gwinnett County in Georgia has 186,000 students. It's the 12th largest school system in the country. And there's a long-term partnership that's been in place between Gwinnett Clean and Beautiful and Gwinnett County Public School. And the idea is to bring in community partners to augment and help do problem-based learning as part of what is being taught in the curriculum. And so Clean and Beautiful being a 501c3, quasi-governmental organization, but it's got a 501c3 component, is that connector with Gwinnett County Public Schools. The last thing on this is that this is a joint effort in the school system between both science or STEM and tech ed, and we're trying to really give an integrated approach to being able to do problem-based learning and approaches across those two. If you go to the next slide. So maybe just real quick, some of the work that we do and try to do. One is that we're really focused on engaging students on hands-on, real-world problem solving and project-based learning. And the reason that will be interesting and critical, one of the partnerships I'm going to talk about with World Wildlife Fund was actually real-world problems around the 50% reduction in wasted food goal. That's a UN Sustainable Development Goal. We want to make sure it's accessible to all students, and we want to integrate across tech ed and science so that you're getting both the same opportunities. The other part was bringing in community partners, and then it was around design and creative thinking. And in the end, it was around community service and civic engagement. So as we teach and work with kids on some critical skills around that apply zero waste principles, it's opportunities, since many of these schools represent, in essence, a small town mayor within some of the school clusters, of being able to engage and continue that conversation even at home with what kids are learning as part of this problem-based approach. And then on professional development for educators, because we couldn't do this without the educators that have opportunities for professional development in environmental ed, which include zero waste concepts and principles. Next. So remember I mentioned community partners. So just to give you an idea of the breadth, when we talk about community partners that are coming in and working with educators, doing educator professional development, and working and developing and putting in place real world problems for children and kids and students from K-1, we're talking 3rd and 5th graders, all the way up to K-12 high school to do that. You'll see in there that USGBC is one of those members, of which I know Stephanie Borges here from USGBC True is, we do try to and work with USGBC and USGBC True to include zero waste principles in the programming we're trying to offer. Next. So one thing I want to just capture on this real quick is that one of the key things here is what we call professional development, and offering the ability for teachers to do that. In the Green and Healthy Schools program, across the county, it really represents, I think, we have what we call formal people that apply and do the formal program, but over 100 plus schools actually participate in the Green and Healthy Schools network, which represents anywhere from 160 to 250 educators. So we do spend a lot of the year working on and doing professional development and structured professional development around environmental education and so forth, and have a number of opportunities during the year, both when we do the fall kickoff, which you can see some pictures of, as well as at the end of the season, and then some summertime professional ed development, which is where you see the person in the boat. Those are actually educators up on Lake Lanier. Next. So there's a couple of programs I want to dive into real quick. Plan It Forward. So one of the things that Gwinnett is really interested in is embedding and including nature-based learning and ecology, starting at K3 and K1 all the way through K12. And so what you see here is an example of some places where we're actually working with learning gardens in the elementary school, and they're planting food gardens, all the way up to the fully blown aquaponic hydroponic system in place. That lab you see in there actually fills about 3 big classrooms at a high school, and it's part of an entrepreneurship program. And as part of that, it's actually a resource management program. They actually, for example, their produce they develop and sell from the aquaponic system they're actually a supplier for the Masters tournament that happens every year here in Georgia, which is a premiere and start of the golf major tournaments in the beginning of the year. So we try to embed that all the way through, and in a very deliberate way as part of tech ed under ag tech, as well as science and STEM delivery. And so things as we look at composting and we look at resource management and we think about things like reduction and reuse, those pieces are embedded within curriculum. And then where we have it within curriculum, we're bringing in community partners to augment that. So a lot of that aquaponics system you see in there was actually through a community partnership and monies that were provided by community partners to be able to put that equipment in place. That is now part of how the county is looking at ag tech across all its high schools. Next. So this one I wanted to highlight a little bit deeper. This is the Food Waste Warrior Program. So this was an effort done nationally by World Wildlife Fund as part of that 50% wasted reduction goal. And this is an interesting example of zero waste principles, because the idea was to get students outside of the classroom and actually work in the cafeteria to do hands-on science. In this case, it was to do, I'll call them food waste audits in the cafeteria, and then look at how much food and packaging was wasted, as well as recoverable food as part of science and STEM. And we had to do that through the curriculum, because if we approached our food nutrition folks to do this without having a learning basis behind it, they would have said, go away. And what was interesting here, and World Wildlife Fund was looking for a anchor institution, of which Gwinnett is because it's large, to be able to roll out a nationwide effort, which they did based on the initial work with Gwinnett and piloting this effort for gathering data about cafeteria lunch and what gets wasted and what can otherwise be captured within sharing tables and waste reduction efforts and all that. So in this case, we actually had 12 or 10 schools, 3rd and 5th graders that actually did the audits. And in those audits, they actually calculated the food. They actually, the food that was wasted as well as the packaging. They did observational interviews. They observed how food was delivered. And then the 3rd and 5th graders, after they did 6 audits, and each time they did an audit, they would try something a little bit different to get at it and see what they could do for reduction. After the 6 audits were done, the 3rd and 5th graders then gathered together as a cohort and developed a series of recommendations based upon the science and data they had collected, which then we brought into the conversation World Wildlife Fund, USDA, EPA, the head of food nutrition service for the county food service delivery, which serves 186,000 meals a day, by the way, as well as superintendent's office and all that. And we actually had the 3rd and 5th graders pitch out their results, their recommendations, and what could be done. So one example of a recommendation was to set up sharing tables to be able to capture food that was still edible and hadn't been opened, that maybe had gotten thrown out, to be able to make it available for students to either take home or as snacks. And when the kids pitched that, the first conversation we had with the food nutrition folks was, well, we think that might be a violation of federal food program requirements. And we had USDA over there, and they said, no, they can do that. That's not a problem. So that recommendation then got implemented and has now been implemented countywide. Afterwards, as we did that with these third and fifth graders, believe it or not, because food nutrition service very rarely do from a leadership, do they look and see how they serve food and the packaging and things that are being used. Well, they did their own observations and figured out that they could probably drop that, by just changing how they serve food, eliminating some of the packaging and some other things, that they could actually, save money, but also reduce their footprint. And so they came in with a series of recommendations for those 10 schools that they piloted those recommendations, which meant instead of serving food to kids, they actually let the kids serve themselves, for example, and a number of other practices. And that pilot, just before COVID hit, indicated a 40% drop in wasted food in both food and packaging. And keep in mind, even though it says 300 pounds of food, it was actually 600 pounds of waste. So the other half was packaging, and that was vastly reduced. So that was an example of, embedding and thinking about zero waste principles. When we talked to, and the students provided recommendations of changing packaging. And as we speak for this year, we had a break in COVID, but as we ramp back up and are deploying this countywide, there was also a decision made at two of the schools to actually go back to washing plates and using as reusable plates and silverware and cups. That is now being piloted, and they have shown that there's actually no increase in labor cost in doing that. So it really has spirited a much broader conversation through third and fifth graders doing problem-based approach on being part of solving this sustainable development goal of a 50% reduction in wasted food in the schools. That's leading to systemic change. So that's what I wanted to maybe pass along to you guys as part of this network of educators, students, and administrators as one program element we're working on. Next. So again, this just shows you the pilot schools. You'll see that in the middle is what the kids worked on, is their campaign for food reduction. And the way they looked at it was, eat what you take. And that was part of the change that the school system made to let them serve themselves. And there you can see a sharing table and some other things. Go to the next. So an outcome of that, which we're working on now, is what we call a compost connectors program. So kids also put as part of that recommendation for composting. So we've partnered with the Food Well Alliance here in Atlanta, Georgia. That includes also the Arthur Blank Foundation, a few other folks. And we're actually have installed and are working on actually collecting compost, particularly vegetables and produce at this point. We don't have centralized composting or that capability in Gwinnett, but we did and could install composting, 3-bin composting systems in schools as part of a learning base for ag tech, as well as composting science and soil science. So at a number of schools, that compost system has been put in place, and the kids actually collect compostable materials at the end of the school line, even as they're talking about reduction, and take that into a compost system. They compost that, and that compost gets used in their learning garden, in their food producing garden. The last thing I would tell you with this as we go forward is that Gwinnett County does gather and harvest about 150,000 pounds a year of food out of their learning gardens that go right back into the food pantries that service the communities where we know we have a lot of children with food nutrition requirements. So it's a nice way of putting it right back into the community as well. Next. So I just wanted to maybe give you an idea of the impact of the Green and Healthy Schools program that I think is amazing. So the idea is, if you can build a system-wide approach across the district of bringing educators together, these are the kind of impacts, at least within this district, that you can have. We have a total of 186,000 kids, but I can tell you that each year that through the Green Healthy Schools program, we're engaging 118,000 kids per year in some capacity. And it's an integrated program between curriculum and problem-based learning approaches with community partners. What you might find most interesting out of that is that, over 14,000 kids are actually engaged in project-based learning, of which the composting and food waste reduction and the Food Warrior program is a big piece of that. And then we also have over 37,000 kids engaged in garden-based, nature-based learning as part of that, along with our community partners. And it's done pretty much on the cheap. I will tell you that. We have some funding. We have some funding from Kroger and World Wildlife Fund, but you can see with a little bit of funding and with community partners what kind of impact you can have. Go to the next. So as always, there's different ways to engage. We're also working this year on mentoring programs that are coming out on this. We're doing there's a brand new high school that just opened, Sechinger, which is really this integrated approach between environmental science as well as artificial intelligence and data science. So one of the things we're going to be working on is student internships at the high school level. They're going to work with elementary school and middle school kids for the compost connectors with data analytics and a app that they're going to design to be able to support their data gathering as well as metrics and metrics tracking as part of a project this year through the integration of artificial intelligence and data science as part of the deployment of the compost program. The last thing I'll tell you on this, Gwinnett does offer and they have the largest science fair in the Southeast, where we also do real world based problems and actually judge and help kids on their projects through community partners solve those problems. One I'd highlight to you with the elementary schools, we had one that they actually were designing with our Department of Water folks, aquatic debris collection systems that were done at the K1 through K5 level. And you'd be surprised and amazed at the sophistication of the devices and the engineering solutions they came up with as solutions for aquatic debris removal from our water systems. Next. So again, we're working on designing what we think is going to be more of a new metrics-based, web-based, cloud-based program that we're underway for this year. We hope to make it'll be open source and something that other folks can use as part of building these kind of networks within school districts, certainly within Georgia and the Atlanta area, but hopefully we'll have a larger application as well. Next. So now I want to switch over on the other side, which is around, we took some of the same approaches on the Food Waste Warrior program and applied that in faith-based efforts that we're doing on zero waste as part of engaging people where they are on zero waste principles. And the method the program we use to do that here in Atlanta, and it's broader, it's national, is what we call the Laudato Si program or Laudato Si effort. So if you're not aware, the Catholic Church and the Pope put out an encyclical for environmental stewardship and integral ecology. And Atlanta was the Archdiocese of Atlanta was one of the first ones to design an action plan to do that. And so we're actually including Pope Francis's call for changes to consumptive lifestyle impacts as part of an archdiocese-wide effort here in Atlanta and North Georgia. Next. So again, a couple things about the mission as we go, just so you know. 1.2 million, it's actually now 1.3 million Catholics in North Georgia served, over 120 parishes. So the Laudato Si action plan, which I'll talk a little bit about, is really a way of getting activities going on a broad range of topics, of which one of them is sustainable purchasing and recycling and zero waste principles as part of the action plan itself. Next. And of course, there are objectives we're doing. We've run a number of pilots, but I do want to note that there is as part of the objectives besides energy and water around reducing waste as well, which also includes purchasing. Next. So, as you know, or you may not know, it's been a journey for us. When the Pope came out with the Laudato Si encyclical in 2015, the Atlanta Archdiocese worked with the University of Georgia to write the action plan. That was the original version in 2016. And then we did a series of pilots throughout a number of schools and churches in the North Georgia area, both rural and urban, to implement the Laudato Si actions, mostly focused on water and energy. But in 2021, we worked on, and we actually rewrote, and I put it in the chat, a revised Laudato Si action plan. And in there, and what we're working on now, is an effort on including and building the purchasing and recycling section around the USGBC True Zero Waste principles as a pathway and mechanism for implementing specific actions within churches, look at from a purchasing and waste reduction perspective. Next. So here I just put a real quick thing. I just out there. That's part of the purchase wisely and recycle. Now I know, Bruce, you'll mention this. You look over there and you'll see, gee, maybe those are those stranded assets you talked about out there. But that's part of the learning process. The original recycling program that we started under the original Laudato Si, we know we have to make a lot of changes to it. And so things of how recycle bins are deployed, in what format, and how the education outreach is being done with the parishioners to be able to use that is a learning effort that's underway, and we're going to hope to do better. You'll see in this that we really try to build in and bring in the idea of zero waste culture using the USGBC True principles and tools as a way of parishes to engage not only just on the recycling program, but also in doing, looking at purchasing differently, as well as how they maybe run events. Next. Quick. So the other partner in this is GIPL, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. I mentioned that. Georgia Interfaith Power and Light is an entity here in Georgia. They're a chapter of IPL. And in there, they work with churches throughout and faith-based organizations throughout Georgia on a number of building creation care teams, which is in other words for green teams, and different programs for waste energy audits and now waste efforts in supporting churches in moving forward on those areas. So that made a nice fit as we looked at the revision to the Laudato Si action plan of zero waste, of including a zero waste based program within GIPL that can support churches like the one I just showed you at, that one was at St. John Newman on that last photo, actually go through and do zero waste audits. That's what we're calling them right now, but it's really a walkthrough that looks as much at reduction to be able to leverage that work. Next. So there's an example of just saying that, in there they actually have an application, okay, of what they call the zero waste program that's founded and part of a partnership we established with USGBC True and USGBC here in Georgia to include true principles and zero waste principles in how waste audits were done and shaping those waste audits and how they were done, or composition studies, if you want to call that, as well as follow-on actions. Next. So as we look here, and these are the two specific examples I want to show you. So the zero waste audit report, we've actually did one for the same parish that showed you on that picture with the two containers. And what you'll find interesting in there, and this is what we're working on now, that as we did the walkthrough, we were really focusing on reduction as much as recycling systems. And we did find that we had some contamination and other issues. We found that the containers that were being used and picked up were also being shared with the school. And as they were found out, they were being penalized and for them being diverted because they had too much contamination. So really what we're working on now as part of the zero waste audits is developing a series of policies that we can apply at churches broadly across Georgia, but specific to the Catholic Church, policy templates that we're going to do at 3 churches to begin with, that we're hoping to push out throughout all parishes in North Georgia that embed zero waste principles, but through putting in place policies around both purchasing, how we run recycling programs, how we run events. The pictures on the right is the other part of the story here, which is part of how do you meet people where they are and get them thinking about creation care or being part of a green team, as well as understanding these things. Well, most Catholic parishes always have what they call their big annual event where the parish comes together for a picnic. Maybe we'll call it a pig picking or whatever else. And so we took the zero waste principles from the schools of doing the zero waste audits and applied it at these events where people had to bring up their plates after they ate and actually sort that. And we had a couple of champions in church. This one was Immaculate Heart of Mary in Briarcliff that you see these pictures from that really wanted to and was interested in saying, hey, how can we run our events a little bit differently and really look at how we do reducing both waste and providing other recycling opportunities that we haven't done in the past. So if you go to the next slide, and then we'll wrap it up. This is an example, about the outcome of that. And this was over a 3 or 4 year period. So we did bring in, as we looked at, and like I said, that one had about 600 to 700 folks attend these events. And keep in mind, churches run events every week, every Saturday and Sunday during the week. So what we're trying to establish here is meeting people in the parish, folks see where they are, but it's also a way of maybe expanding this to other events around zero waste principles. So when you looked at 2019 and you look at it, we brought in compost now. So we did have a composter and we did sort and all that. You'll see in 2019 that the total waste generated was 448 pounds. We composted a lot of it. A lot of, you'll see in those bins were the inedibles from the pig picking that include hooves, head and skin, and other things. You can see recycling was 98 pounds and total was 67 pounds. But what I want to tell you, we did these audits every year. We did observations and we went back and made changes to how they serve food, what type of packaging we allowed folks to bring in. Did we do bottled drinks or not? We changed all that. We went to, either, tea, lemonade that people brought in their own containers, or we had some compostable cups. On the right side, Kate, we call the picnic committee, had more people at this event, did the pig picking, but you'll notice that waste had dropped by over a third that was generated. Total recycling dropped by over half, which is actually a great story. Total to landfill dropped by half as well. And total composting as a percentage went up, which is exactly what we wanted. The pig, by the way, those hooves, heads, and skins got reused by people that culturally use those products. So they took them home. So it wasn't even part of the waste that was generated because they got, those edible parts that were still edible from a cultural perspective ended up going back to people's homes where it actually got used. So
Jay, we kind of need to wrap it up. We're a few minutes over.
yeah, I'm going to wrap it up now. So anyway, that's the story on that, of this journey, right, around zero waste, that through gathering the data, tweaking it every year with people that want to do it. By the time we did the last one, everyone knew exactly what to do, behaved, anyone from back of the kitchen to serving that food to those that attended the event, and it went off like clockwork. So
Fantastic.
back over to you.
Thank you so much, Jay. And Bruce, I'm going to move you to the stage as well if you'd like to turn your camera on for any final thoughts on this really great session. Lots of great feedback in the chat, so thank you for adding comments there. And just any final thoughts before we wrap and send folks back to the main stage.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Sound great.
Okay, very quickly, I mean, any kind of a program you're doing, it is a journey, and you have to set that path because you're going to hit roadblocks along the way, and don't get discouraged. But And again, where I highlighted in the pathway and the steps to achieve zero waste, don't get discouraged if it's 2 steps forward and 1 back. It's a long, it's a process. So, and again, if there was a lot of chats there where people were asking me specific questions, feel free to call me. We have a wealth of information, and I'd be happy to, talk to anyone who's got the time. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. And any final wrap-up thoughts, Jay, on community outreach and effective programs?
Well, I just think that, again, part of this is engaging kids younger, that, keep in mind that these schools are part of community and they're community assets, just like churches are. So if we can engage and get folks thinking about it in the way they live and work each day and as part of critical skill development, then, as they show up in the employee workspace, they'll already be familiar with or have an understanding of these things to begin with. So I'm trying to get at it from that side, so that, hopefully, Bruce, and you end up with, employees that are already aware and practicing these things or have seen them before, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for your presentations. It's really great hearing some of the awesome new ideas, like the if you don't know bin and some of the apps that are out there to connect users. So everyone, please return back to the main stage. This session track B is now complete. Thank you so much to our speakers, and we look forward to seeing everybody for the keynote at 12:15. But please be sure to get there now for some sponsor updates and a showcase there. Thank you all very much.